This is the first in a monthly series of webinars we're offering for our blended broadband communities and really open to anyone with an interest in using technology to improve community. In a moment, we'll be talking with Erin Brossoit of GoldenShovel and Mary Iliff from Two Smart Women. Our format today is question and answer. It's a panel discussion, and Bill Coleman will be our not mean moderator. Today we're test driving a new platform, so if everything is working properly, and I sure hope it is, there are a couple of ways to interact with our panelists. You can simply type your question or comment in the chat box at any time, or you can click the smiley face icon in the right corner of the attendee list box to raise your hand, and I will attempt to enable your mic. Now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. Oh, there she is. Mary Iliff has a BS in Speech Communication and a minor in Business and Marketing from South Dakota State University in Brookings, South Dakota. As a college student, Mary designed her dream job and presented it to the president of the company. As a result of her gumption, she became a coordinator of an entire department before she graduated. Her enthusiasm and accomplishments have propelled her into many leadership positions in civic and community organizations. Mary has developed grassroots advocacy and professional relationships with state legislators where none previously existed. Mary's gift of gab, ability to see humor in every situation, and genuine love for people has become her trademark. And there's Mary. Next we have Erin Brossoit, who is the VP of Business Development at GoldenShovel Agency. Erin has over 10 years experience in community development markets. Erin has developed cutting-edge interactive work for communities all across the country. He is a board member for the Mid-America Economic Development Council and is on the Communications Committee for the National Rural Economic Development Association. Erin's work has won local, state, and national design awards. We are delighted that Erin and Mary and that Bill Coleman is standing in the wings ready to moderate today's discussion. So with that, I'm going to say welcome to Erin and to Mary and turn the floor over to Bill Coleman. Bill.
Thank you, Becky. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get right into the questions. And with this webinar series, we asked people for input as to what they wanted to hear about, and the community portal idea came right to the top of the list. So that's why this one is our leading webinar, but we'll have these regularly from here on out. Mary, we'll start with you. What are the best approaches to obtaining buy-in and building a community coalition to create that community portal? What organizations generally own that portal? And as it seems there's probably a good number of voices involved in creating that coalition, what are the good strategies for maintaining good partner relations?
Okay. You know, I think the first part about this is that, you know, who owns it? In the end result that you want is that it's a community asset. And so it's just like a city park or anything else like that, that in the end, you want your community to feel like they have ownership in this portal. And so feeling that ownership, for example, you want to be able to, when families coming, you know, someone has family coming in, they say, oh, check out our website, our portal, it's great. You can find out what else you want to do here if you want to think of some ideas, or even like, you know, the chamber is telling people about coming to live here. We have lots of things you do. Go ahead and check out this portal. That's the idea behind it, that you want it to be a community asset. And so the true feeling of ownership, you want it to be the community. But as far as when you put it together, you know, not just, I should just back up a second, it should be the groups, it should be the businesses, it should be everyone feeling like they have ownership in this. As we're talking about ownership, it's really who's in place to help make sure that you put it together correctly, I guess. And so that helps with the ownership. When you're putting together the portal, the website, you want it, probably the biggest thing to start with is to make sure you have the right people at the table. The right voices are at the group, the people that truly represent the entire community, so it can be a community asset. Just thinking through just a few of them, you know, looking at it as, if it's going to be a community portal, then it should be community leadership. Maybe that's from someone representing the mayor, the city council, that kind of idea, EDA directors, or someone to represent them, Chamber of Commerce, business leaders, organizations, things like that. So in every town, you have to remember is different. And that's why it's hard to always answer a question kind of so broad. But when you think about it, just make sure, that's probably the biggest thing, is that you have the right people. And this is where we've seen some places they had to take a step back because they didn't have the right people at the table. So it's very important that you look at who should be at that table, because you don't want to get halfway down down in this process and have the portal starting to be put together and you're missing a few key people. They come in and you have to backtrack, because that's going to cost you time and that's going to cost you money. So as you're going to go through and you have all these voices, it's really important that you make sure, though, that you look at who should be at the table. And then the other part that we really suggest is that you have one main spokesperson for who's going to be for the group, and that you also put down the parameters of what they can make decisions on. We've just found when there's so many people to talk to, it's hard to keep it moving forward. So just like any other group, make sure that you have someone that's going to be in charge of the group, as well as who's going to be the spokesperson for the web designer, whoever you're using. So those are probably my biggest things when you're looking at that. Some good strategies is it's all about the planning and making sure you have the right people at the table in your community.
Okay. Good, thank you. Aaron, any additional comments?
Yeah, you bet. I guess some of the experiences we've had with community portals have been, it wraps a little bit around the audiences that they're going after. In one scenario, the community portal would have a tourism presence for visitors, a presence for the city, which would include the citizens that are living in the city, and then the economic development presence for attracting outside businesses and supporting businesses and entrepreneurs in the community. So we put things together like that, and then had the benefits of having the shared sort of system where the investment into the tools might be shared. It can bring down some of the prices and things. So we've seen some of that. But as far as like the other scenario is where you have a bunch of organizations of the same type in the community looking to work together. And in our situation with economic development and GoldenShovel agency is you would have perhaps a regional economic development organization or a city that has that represents the area, and then they might bring in other organizations like other townships or counties and communities that are around that have the same kind of presence. And in those scenarios, there's also, it can be economies of scale for working together. I completely agree with Mary that especially during the creation of the portal, it helps to have a main point of contact just to keep the whole project focused and centered. But once it launches, then the respective audiences can oftentimes take control of their own sections and still work together.
Okay, good. Aaron, we're going to keep with you and go on to our second question, and it's talking about that audience for the marketing effort. And so many communities want to put together a portal, but then they have, there's, as you talked about, there's the people who live there, there's the tourists looking at a community, there's the economic development focus to externally attract investment in your community. Which of these, how compatible are these audiences, and how do you recommend the communities decide what their best approach is to determine the specific audience or the multiple audiences for a portal?
Certainly. In that scenario, once again, back to, Mary was saying, there's a lot of different sizes of communities and different needs as far as the scope and scale of how these portals are set up. In the communities where we've done a single city that wanted to take advantage of bringing all of the different parts, they wanted to have the tourism, the economic development, and the city all inside the same portal. Our recommendation is that you don't try to sell to all three of those audiences right off of the same website. And the reason is because other cities and other communities are going to have a separate presence for each of those targeted audiences. So if it's tourism, it's all about heads in beds and who's going to stay overnight, and for attracting families and kids for the weekend, showing them things to do and places to eat and what hotels to stay at. Then you have the economic development, which is a totally different audience. Over there, you have some of it that's focused internally, especially if you're a more rural community, working with business expansion or working with entrepreneurs trying to create jobs from inside. But then there's also the business attraction side, where you're speaking to site selectors. And site selectors have very specific needs and requests when they come to a community site. That's very different than, certainly different than what a tourism a family is going to be looking for. And then the third audience that has, I think, the most flexibility is the city itself, because on one hand, you've got a site that's set up for the audience of the citizens. So you have people that are going to be using the city functions, people that are going to be looking for a place to pay their water bill or to do things that are really unrelated to tourism and unrelated to the economic development audiences. That audience tends to also be, and we haven't done these personally, but Mary, perhaps you have, where you can start tying in some other aspects of the community too, like sometimes the school district will get involved, or a library system, or some of the other main community players, that they would be put in under the kind of the same look and feel and structure as that part of the portal, because it talks to that audience. So in that case, if you go to a single site, I'd recommend immediately saying, are you looking for the city? Are you looking for the tourism? Are you looking for economic development? And sending those people to there so you can have the most impact accessing that audience. Or even to the point of having separate sites for those audiences, but maybe sharing some of the technology behind the scenes to make it into a true portal.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
Well, and I think, yeah, just he's exactly on. I think the other idea is, we always talk, it's systems thinking it backwards. What is the main goal that you need to accomplish with this? And for example, finding Wyndham, it was really about, they wanted to highlight their businesses and people that were coming to town that they could find. They come to town, they don't know where, what can you do in Wyndham? Well, there's all, it's for them to highlight their businesses basically. And so that's what that was based upon. And so I just want to take 1 second too, I think, to go back. It'll take longer than a second, but one of the first decisions you need to make too is what kind of website, what kind of portal do you want a portal, or do you really want a content management site? I think that's just a small thing I want to put people, because people think they don't always have the what a portal is, and really I see a portal, when we talk about portals, it's kind of like it's linked to a lot of the outside world. It's not, content management is you have to keep updating it, where a portal is nice, as we keep talking about economics and stuff later on. It's because everyone else has to keep everything up versus you having to keep a huge website up and going. So as you're thinking about your audience, you also, as we're thinking about putting this together, a portal is nice because basically after it gets up, it kind of runs itself, and so you don't have a lot of updating to do. But that is something to think about, because we've had one place that they thought they wanted a portal and they actually wanted a content management site. So anyway, that's kind of just something, a side note to think about too, as you're trying to figure out who should be at the table. What kind of site are you looking at too, and how much of it is going to be content driven too. So.
Okay, thank you. Mary, budgets are always a constraint as to what we want and what we can afford. Can you talk about the features that can be provided through low-cost portals, and which features drive up the portal development costs? And how does one work through that development process when everyone's on the same page in terms of design and sophistication levels that fit budget limitations?
Budget is everything, just like our personal lives and everything. Overall, you have to know your budget and your goals. And I think before you even look at, well, what can we afford? I think it's also figuring out, prioritizing your goals. It's just like, for example, my husband and I just bought a car, and it was going into what do we need to have in this vehicle, and what's a non-negotiable, and what is oh, that'd be nice to have. And so I think it's the same idea as when you're looking at a portal. What does it have to do? And that goes back to the audience, what you need it to do, and then what would it be nice if in addition to, and I really mean this, that you should have whoever you're bringing on, or if you get RFPs or bringing in anyone, any kind of web companies, they'll help you walk through that a little bit too. I think people always get scared to tell someone how much they're looking at they can spend or what their budget is, but really we should be working on the same page, and what can you afford by what you need to accomplish. And so, making sure that you really have your priority set of what needs to be accomplished with this website first and foremost, and then, after that, then you can add your wants and needs. Again, going back to what I just kind of talked about though, if you have a portal, it's it's a very highly affordable. That's, for example, the Finding Wyndham. We needed, that was one of their priorities. It had to be highly affordable, had to be not content driven because they needed it. They didn't have the power to keep the people behind it to keep writing the content and putting it on there. And so making sure that if it's a portal, that's a pretty inexpensive way to go. And again, everyone else is kind of, once you leave the portal, everyone else is keeping up their own sites. And so a portal is a very cost-effective way to, for if you're going to, to have a website versus that content-driven. But yeah, so it just depends on really what you're looking for and figuring out your wants and your needs. And with a portal, sometimes your only ongoing costs are your hosting fees, maybe a little bit of maintenance, but that's really the nice thing after the end. And there's ways to fundraise for that too. If you have things that you want to keep, you want to have more stuff, you might have a spot where people can sponsor a section right on the portal, and so they can highlight their business, but also help pay for that website, that ongoing hosting costs, and different things like that. So I guess mainly it's a question that's a little bit hard to totally address as far as which points, but a portal overall is a pretty cost-effective, highly affordable option for people. So versus a content-driven site.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, your comments on budget? Driving features?
Yep, you bet. Well, Mary, I think goes right on. Some of the things that we found that help with keeping the budget low is that there's certain tools that can be shared across the industries, and then there's ones that are more unique to the specific industries. And so, like a news tool, you can post the latest news is going on, is going to be very useful to tourism. It's also going to be useful to the chamber. It's also going to be useful for economic development and also for the community, just how different types of news that'll be going through it. And so that one tool, you can oftentimes get a much lower cost because there's a repeat use of the same technology across the portal, so you're not building separate pieces. Now, an exception to that would be something like in the economic development world, you might need a special site selection tool for finding retail businesses that a site selector could use and to get some reports or make some intelligent decisions about a specific commercial property. But that doesn't really apply to tourism at all. It rarely applies to the community. That's where if you're building something special for that specific industry, and especially if you're working with an organization that's going to be building that piece as a custom item, the costs can be higher. So, but the nice thing is that companies that have been working within the realm of portals tend to already have that kind of mindset in place, so that oftentimes you'll have a shared, some kind of shared system, if you will, so that if we make an update on one piece, it actually updates all of them at once. That type of thing makes it a lot easier for like our business to keep our costs way down, because we don't have to go into 4 different sites and make 4 different fixes when Internet Explorer 20 comes out. We can do it one time and update everything. That's that kind of speaks to some of the ongoing costs, and especially when you're looking at maintenance and how are you going to keep the site running, because from our experience, the second a site launches, it starts deteriorating unless you constantly keep it cooking and make sure that it's always fresh.
Can I add something,
Thank you.
Bill?
You bet.
Can I add a quick thing? When I talked earlier, having the right people on board, but having that spokesperson, I really mean this. Your costs, you can keep your costs, those unexpected costs down by making sure you did your homework at the beginning and the right people are there, because that is where we have kind of seen people where they've gone forward and then they had to take 2 steps back. Well, the 2 steps back cost that. That costs money, and the changes, if you have something and then you all of a sudden want to change it, that's where all your costs can come in too. So I just want people to be very aware of that. That's probably our biggest advice to people as they're getting going when we start meeting with the group, is saying, do we have the right people here, and do you have the parameters of what this person can do for you? So I don't know if you agree with that, Aaron, but it seems like, again, making sure you keep moving forward is having that right person as the spokesperson to help control those costs.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mary, on that also. And there's also the cost. There's 2 parts. There's the development, which is the building of the portal, which is a little heavier, and it's up front because you got to do all the work and get it built. But then after that, there's the ongoing maintenance costs, and I find there's a pretty large variable in that. And so looking, for example, If it's a site where you have to contact the firm to have them update it, there's a cost associated with that usually, you know, for a lot of traditional firms. If you have your own admin system that's easy to use, you could go in there and you can update it yourself, but then you take into the cost your own staff time, potentially your time. That costs something. There's training that has to be done, and then there has to be consistency, which is the hardest thing, of course. Then there's the third type of thing with an integrated portal, where if you can make it so that you can post news and then share it to the other parts of the portal, especially if they're in parts where it's going to be relevant, like an event that's going on might be relevant to the tourism, the community, and potentially economic development, depending on the scenario. Something like that, if there's a way to like post a news story and then recommend it and share it without having it to be put in 3 times or 4 times, that saves time. And so these are the types of things, especially because there's technology, so much technology around it, that get forgotten early on in the process, and they don't come to light until you're paying every year for the ongoing maintenance. And so those are some of the ways also to keep budgets down, in my opinion.
Well, and I think also to add that, Aaron, you know, when you have that administrative part, you know, some people, we always say, how much of the keys to the castle do you want? You know, you can have people go in there and sometimes they can go in and they can do too much, and then now you've got a cost to fix that problem. So that's why a portal, again, you know, Aaron's talking about too, as we're going in and you're adding things, the more you can have it, like, for example, I keep going back to this one, but that's Finding Wyndham. When it's based on, we harness the power of Google. So once you click on like shopping, you go to Google. We don't have it, you don't have anything to do with after that. And so the nice thing is that, you know, you're using the outside world, and you don't have to have all these, you don't have to have people constantly updating things. And that's the beautiful thing about a portal, a true, you know, get it one spot, have it go elsewhere. So I just really think about that as you're starting to, you know, what do we want on there? And you want, oh, I want About Us and I want this. And just remember, that's all content driven. And if you want to update it, then you got to get someone to go in there. Even if you're saying we have volunteers, it's finding the volunteer time and stuff. So it's just the things to think about as far as, you know, in the end, cost and money is how much do you want, you know, harnessed by the power of what's already out there, or, you know what I mean, the actual content writing and stuff. So.
Well, that's a great point. I think it really gets back to audience then too. If people are looking for coffee shops, you're not really you don't care whether they go to coffee shop A or B in Wyndham. But if you're working more on economic development and business attraction, controlling that message and keeping that more under your control might be a lot more important, so that you don't want them off in Google where they'll find out something that bad happened last week. You want the good news on your site, maybe. Aaron,
and then all comes down to the money. Yep, you're exactly right.
Okay. Any other discussions about that? Mary, you had a few comments about sponsorships on the website or so on that could help continuing pay. Any other tips for sustainable funding, Mary?
You know, I've really seen that. Yeah, sorry, Aaron, if you want to. Hey, I'm loud and obnoxious. That's what I kind of said in my write-up. So, no, honestly, look at, you know, knowing your community and knowing your businesses and how much, you know, we've seen where one business paid for the whole, like basically has paid to help go with the ongoing maintenance, and they just really believed in it. Where they really couldn't do that, they just had ads, like sponsorships with ads and stuff in there, and so they could, a business could highlight. Or another idea too is Wyndham has, like, and they have not started this, and again, because it's also content driven, this one part is, but finding deals. And it's actually Bill was talking about, we were talking about Groupon and things like that. It's that same idea, but on your website, just for your town, you could have deals. When if someone wants to put a deal on there or their flyer, that could cost a little bit of money to help just with the maintenance of it, of the website. So again, you have to make sure you cover your costs on putting that stuff up, but also then it might help with the ongoing costs that you're worried about how you're going to pay for that.
Okay. Aaron, any comments? Further comments?
Yeah, you bet. There's definitely, just to talk about the more self-sustaining ways to generate money off of a portal, it's always a fine line, but I like to go back to the audiences and who are the people that are first of all, what kind of advertising or sponsorship is going to reflect well with that audience, and then for the people that want to speak to that audience. And so, like, we got, I'm just going to use the kind of three audiences I've been focusing on. On one hand, in the economic development world, there isn't any advertising. It does not helpful. Putting advertisements on your site are going to take away from the credibility of the site, and it's going to look like your economic development in your community is not well supported, and that's why they're selling ads. Now, there's ways around that. Some examples, like Rockford, Illinois, they have a member-based economic development organization that pays significant amounts of money to be members of that organization, and then they prioritize in their directories of supporters by putting those members that are the highest paying up on the top. So in a way, there's a support and a way to give back to the people that are giving to the organization, and certainly some of those dollars support their site. In the case of like St. Paul Convention and Visitor Authority, they're in a different game, because now suddenly you've got the hotels and the restaurants and the attractions that are as interested in paying to see those, or as interested in marketing to those potential tourists as the tourism organization is. Also, you have a different audience, and since you got families and kids and that are going to be doing these attractions, they're going to be looking for deals, and it suddenly does become appropriate to have sponsored packages that might combine a hotel and an event and a restaurant all together. And those can be paid. Sometimes there's advertising. That can be tricky when you're dealing with a membership base, especially like in the chamber situation, where the chamber and tourism might be together, because if there's members, they don't necessarily want to see other people advertising. But that's there's different scenarios and different structures, but it's a lot easier to sell advertising through a tourism site. When you get to like a city itself and you're talking to the community, there's a couple ways to go. I wouldn't recommend doing a straight advertising approach, because once again, it looks like the city is trying to make a couple extra bucks, when that's not really the impression that I think a community wants to send to its citizens. So instead, you'd have a different structure. You might have like sponsorships, where a major employer in the community might sponsor the whole portal, like Mary was referring to. Or you might have a couple, 2 or 3 of them, and it can be a brought to you by, and they could do it for a year or 2 years, or pay for part of the development as a sponsor. So those are ways to bring the costs down. Especially on the economic development side, we find that a lot of the costs are not coming straight from just the economic development department. They're bringing in electrical utilities in the community. They're bringing in major employers in the community to help bring some money to the table in order to develop these sometimes. So that's where I think that gets offset by having to do any kind of online marketing.
Good, thank you. Mary, Angie Palmer up in Lake County had a question about what role did the city of Windham as a government agency play in developing Finding Windham?
I almost got to take mute out there. Yes. That one really was more probably part of the EDA, and they wanted to really, they had a small group already formed. It was Finding Windham Group. So they already had their colors and their kind of design of their logo and stuff like that. They were a small group that really wanted to highlight businesses in Windham, and that was their overall goal. It was a little bit more of a, they didn't have tons of money to work with. They didn't, but they needed something to really highlight their businesses. So as far as the actual city having as much in there, it was more driven from the EDA director and working with the businesses. And we work with a lot with the businesses. So that's kind of how we got involved with them and stuff. But yeah, it probably wasn't as much of the city. The city was, through the EDA, you can say that they're part of that, but it was driven by the EDA.
Okay, thanks. Aaron, we've talked about this a little bit, but what are the best ways to maintain current and interesting information on a portal? And you talked about the news feeder, maybe. What other things can you use?
Yeah, you bet. Good question. Well, first of all, I guess there's multiple reasons for maintaining current and interesting news beyond the audiences. And so I'll just speak to just being found on search engines requires an active page that changes. And so having current news is part of the plan, and being strategic about making sure that something goes out at least weekly is relevant. And so and that's a big part of it, not just to provide current news to your audience, which is certainly important, but just to keep your site fresh and current. So someone comes there and sees that there's somebody paying attention and that they can rely on the content that they're going to find inside that site to be accurate because it's current. So if you have something, and if your website hasn't had a latest news story since the festival from 6 months ago, right away the impression is left that, well, is any of this information current? Are these phone numbers right? Are these people still work in these departments? It just adds this immediate takes away from the credibility right away. As far as ways of maintaining current interesting information, I see there's two parts. There's the information you're creating, and then there's the information that you're sourcing from other people. As far as the information you're creating, it's very much tied back to the audience that you're speaking to. What we recommend and do with our clients is, like, let's take economic development, for example. We'll handpick 3 goals that we want to accomplish with our strategy. So it might be something like, we're looking to attract businesses to make sure that we have a presence there for site selectors. We might have one for the business retention and helping keep jobs in the town, and one for entrepreneurs and support. And then under each of those goals, we'll write down a handful of strategies, not too many, 3 or 4 or 5, of the type of thing that you would write or publish that would support that goal. So if you're doing a business expansion, for example, we'd make sure that regularly there was an article about some jobs that were added on to a local business, or we'd highlight a business in a way that the community can relate with it. So instead of saying, hey, this plating company in town has done this in sales, you might say, did you know that this plating company makes a piece for the PT Cruiser? Something that they might be able to relate with, and it starts to tie some of the talent and expertise of the community back to the community and inform the people there. And so those might be a couple of the strategies we'd choose within those goals. And then from there, that really helps us both refine what we're looking for from other places, like news coming out of the university, for example, might be really relevant to the community or to the economic development industry. And so we keep an eye on that, and we know that, oh, this lines up with one of our goals, and make sure that that gets published both on the website and then also on the social media sites from there.
Okay, good. Mary? Good. Mary?
Yeah, I think he touched upon it too. The social media aspect of things too. That's always a way to keep things current. Hopefully most of the businesses or whoever you're having on there is keeping that current. Social media is a nice way to do that. But, you know, again, looking at what your budget is, whoever you're working with on the website too, on your portal, whatever company you go with, again, make sure you say, you know, here, what can we do for this? We want to make sure it's relevant. We want to make sure they'll give you ideas too, and just work through those issues with them and what you're worried about. And I think that's the biggest thing. I always say the biggest thing to anyone that I work with is that make sure you tell me, you know, your wishes, but also your concerns. You know what I mean? Like, how are we going to keep this up? And that's something that you can be, you know, they can walk you through with that and come up with solutions for you with you too. So make sure whoever you sit down, whoever you decide to eventually do this portal with, that you bring those concerns to them. And, you know, if they don't bring it up, you bring it up, but they most likely will too. But just, you know, make sure you talk it through, and that's part of the conversation with them.
Okay, good. Mary, how do you market a potential a portal to users? I mean, it's great to create one. How do people find it? And can maybe talk a little bit about marketing the portal? Maybe the importance of the naming of the portal, I think is important. So.
Well, you know, and the thing is, like, finding Wyndham, for example, when we walked into that, they already had that. That was their, you know, that was their whole group was based upon that one, for example.
Oops.
What did you have? Sorry.
My chair I just adjusted my chair.
It scared me a second. Bill was coming at it. The biggest thing what we do as a company, we think our biggest way to not only it markets, but it shows the power of it, or making sure that you harness the power from it, is that we believe in training. So again, I talk a lot about when you do it with businesses and highlighting the businesses in your town, and I mean, that's where we really work towards more, is like the business portion of it. And so, for example, in Wyndham, part of it is that we had training sessions where the businesses, organizations, communities came in And we actually showed them, for example, because the website is based upon harnessing the power of Google for them, we showed them how do you claim your Google page, it's Google Plus now, and how do you do those little things to help increase your optimization and things like that. And so it's really important to me when that helps with the buy-in that we talked about at the beginning too, Bill, as well as then later to help. They're excited about it. They're going to tell others about it too. And so a huge part of what we do is the training portion of it, because after you have it, you got to be able to get people to it. You got to tell them how to use it, how to really, like you were saying, Bill, you don't want them to go look for a coffee shop and they get in a coffee shop from somewhere else. What's funny is when we start those training sessions, that's what happened. For example, we had one of our clients that lived farther, that was like 20 minutes away. They're the first one that popped up, and that's what we want to help like Wyndham, for example, their businesses are the ones that pop up. But when you do that, you're also helping them, for example, with that training session, in any type of organic search, it helped them come up. So it helped in both ways. And so training is a huge thing that we always, almost everything we do is always, there's a training portion of it with whoever, if it's the audience, if it's the people running, whatever it may be, training is a big part of it. And then there's other ways, you can, for example, at that same one, you could have businesses handing out little information sheets, or they have stickers on their windows that say we're part of Finding Wyndham. They did that, and it kind of just kept blooming from there. And so different ways of doing it. Another way, like we said earlier, that helps with advertising, if you're doing, again, it depends on, like Aaron was saying, who's your audience and what this purpose of this website is. But again, if it's to get your businesses out there and get people to go there, again, doing like a coupon idea right on there, get people driven, drive your community there to use it so that they start using it and telling others about it. And so those are some really great ways that are quick ways, but those are focused more around if you're trying to promote your businesses and trying to get traveling people that are coming through to maybe, to look at the website. But that's a really great way of being able to get people to your website.
Thanks. Aaron?
Yeah, let me just, I guess, add a couple things. I thought that was all well said. If it's a portal of multiple groups of the same industry, our experience is that sending a message out from one, whether it's through your website and then through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, some of the social media tools, that you can pick out some of the keywords that you'd like to be found in Google. You can put some of those keywords into the content that you're sending. So when it gets published and Google's looking at the content that's coming out of your site, it finds the keywords that will help you organically go up in the search engines. Now, the nice thing about a portal, when you have a group of sites together, I guess an example would be like the Great River Energy portal that we put together, where you've got Great River Energy at the top, and then you've got 26 distributive cooperatives, each with their own economic development site underneath. That way, when Great River has something loud to say, not only do they say it out of their site, but they say it out of 26 other websites also from their own voice. And that's done, I want to say with a push of a button, but more or less being able to share it through the system. And so in that way, I think that really helps, because in the end of the day, especially in economic development, someone's going to look for you online, and you're not even going to know if they're a visitor, because so much of that business is done anonymously. Different situation, like Mary was saying, regarding some of the other audiences, especially with tourism. It's totally different marketing. Now you're dealing with visitor guides. You're being found more actively paying for marketing and billboards and those, some of the more traditional modes also, as well as on the web. But it has the same kind of effect. And then the other thing is, I wouldn't recommend, when you just look at attracting users, I don't think you have to be as concerned about how many users there are, because there's so many different size communities. It's not important that every single citizen is on that site, or that every single visitor is on the site. Visitor is a little bit more, because you can see how many people are looking at them, but with the economic development world, it's rarely about how many visitors are at the site, and it's more about, did you have the proper information there when the right visitor showed up? And so depending on who the audience is, you can carry the weight of the amount of users on it differently. I wouldn't say because the tourism's getting 700 visits in a month, that means that the economic development organization is doing poorly because they had 250 or something like that. The audiences have different metrics for measuring.
Okay.
I was just
Good.
going to add too, Bill, you know, as you're looking at your budget, that might be something you want to think about, just like any business when they go in, how much startup marketing should we have? And maybe that you will leave some extra money there, maybe to do some online market or some online ads, that kind of idea. So it's something to think about when you're putting that budget together. It doesn't hurt to, you know, sometimes we spend it all on putting it together. That's never good either. So because right now with technology, you can directly get to people. I mean, even if, you know, it's about tourism or getting the people back, you know, that used to live here. I mean, you could have ads on Facebook if you want, down to people that graduated from that certain town, things like that. And so directly targeted to them. So just keep that in mind when you're working on your budget too, to leave a little money there for some marketing.
Okay, good. What about the audience? Does the audience have any additional questions? And type them into the box, or Becky, I don't know if they can also, I don't think they can necessarily talk out loud, so they need to. Well, I've got one more. Is the marketing, most of these portals are the members or the participants encouraged to put a link to the portal on their site? And then why wouldn't a business want to put their, you know, the portal link on their site if they're resistant to doing that? Any ideas?
Do you want to take it, Aaron, or do you want me to go? I'll go ahead.
Go for it.
You know, honestly, the more you can link, you know, the more that people are willing to put that link on there, the greater chance of getting people. And, you know, as far as people why they want to put it on there, you know, honestly, the only reason I'm thinking is because they, you know, they have a website they haven't updated forever, and they don't know what even, you know, maybe how to do that. That's one of my reasons I'm thinking the businesses, because we do encounter a lot of businesses that, again, because they have a content-driven website, they haven't updated it for years. And so honestly, we had one person at one time told us, I have to start all over. I can't get a hold of the guy that did it. And so that's really probably one of the only reasons I can see maybe that I wouldn't want to have it there. And there might be other reasons, but honestly, the more you can encourage the people that are going to benefit from it to put that on their website, the better. I mean, that's, again, more traffic. You know, have people put it on their social media sites. All that kind of stuff is huge. So the more you can spread the word that way, yeah, the better you're going to have people, again, using this great tool and harness the power of it.
Okay, thanks. Aaron?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the whole idea of a community portal is that the idea is that that not only are services being provided to the people that are there, but that any business that happens in the community is good for the whole community. And the hope would be that the majority of the members and businesses that are engaged and involved in the community portal are coming from that kind of perspective. I mean, I guess if a business really doesn't feel that there's a benefit to the community portal, then either the community portal isn't providing a benefit to them, or they aren't seeing it, so there isn't a good enough sales message, in which case I guess I wouldn't recommend them linking to it if they really don't feel that there's value. But the hope would be that you know, there'd be value because those people would be wanting to speak to the audience that it's being reflected towards. And if if they don't see that value or don't feel like that, you know, it's carrying that kind of weight, then they might not be good partners for the portal.
Cool. You know, back in the old days, I can remember web rings, where a bunch of quilters or something, you just go from one website or whatever, the fishing from one website to the next, kind of a, you know, see a whole variety of organizations like that. Is the portal kind of replace that idea, or is there still such a thing? Aaron?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of an evolution of the same sort of idea. And that you saw that because that made sense. It's like, why wouldn't you have a bunch of these sites? We'll just have this kind of connecting piece that's going to bring them all together, and that way, that's the common navigation or common interface to them. I don't think there's that much overlap in the audiences, to be honest. That's the thing, is that if you're a tourism guy looking at the tourism site, why go to the economic development site anyway? What's the point of having an additional navigation that's going to give more functions and buttons and things to figure out and make the learning curve worse, when really you only need to speak to that audience and put your best foot forward so that that audience is most impressed. There's a desire, I think, because of the community nature of these, to have them be engaged with each other. Certainly, and I support it, especially in things like maybe some of the branding items. If you really want to have a community brand, or to tie the way the tools work could be the same. Why not have the news tool here work the same way as the one over here? Because then there's no learning curve. But that still opens up the ability for the tourism site has a different, maybe a little different look. It might have the same navigation structure, but it could have its own look and feel, which might be different than what the economic development or community really wants to do. And so I think it is being replaced, or it's changed from then. I don't see as much need to have it all be run from a central spot. I really see a portal as a network of sites that have abilities to share things behind the scenes more than anything, because that's where the community gets its benefit. So I'll leave it at that.
Mary?
Yeah, he said that very nicely, and I think that's very true. And I think, honestly, if people are seeing the portals, I mean, you hear so many nightmares from the content management sites that, I mean, almost every person we talk to from a business standpoint is, they're like, oh, this website hasn't been updated. The nice thing, again, about a portal is that, you know, it's a little less of you updating versus, you know, it just kind of automatically happens, that kind of idea. And so to me, it's a more of an it's economics too. It's really become an answer to people from an economic standpoint.
It's interesting when I listen to you, Mary, if you have a content management system, then you're responsible for updating. If you have a portal, then you're not responsible for updating really everyone else's stuff. But your portal looks, if everyone else isn't updating their stuff, then your portal looks just as bad either way, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know, you've hit something you hit a point that when you're looking at that, you need to think about that. So for example, you're exactly on. That's why in like Finding Wyndham, we harness the power of Google. It's constantly updated. There is no worry about them not updating that. They did have the social media sites on there, like Facebook sites for their different businesses on there. Are you going to have some Facebook pages that haven't probably been touched for months? Oh yeah, you're going to have that. But I think, again, you need to really look at, again, who, for example, they have on that one links to other organizations on that page. You need to really look at, are they going to keep their site up? Because you're exactly right. If they don't keep it up, but it does at least come off where they leave your site and go to theirs. Hopefully those other ones are going to do that. But it is something you got to think about, because it can make your site not as updated. But, you know, again, if you use things like the social medias, you're hoping most of them, we always tell people, don't have a social media site unless you're going to keep it up. So, yeah, it's something to think about. You know, it definitely is, Bill, to make sure whatever you do put on there or what you link it to will be updated.
Have you heard of communities that have had a certain standard where they take companies off their portal because their websites aren't up to date or don't meet a certain quality?
Well, and again, the ones that they don't put tons of links on individuals, it's more some organizations and stuff like that. Again, that's why that was one of the main concerns when we were working with, you know, coming up with the infrastructure of Finding Wyndham, is they didn't want to, first of all, they didn't want to have to put everyone's link on there. They wanted it to go to one spot, and that's, like I said, it harnessed the power of Google. That once you click on shopping, you go to Google, and Google updates everything. And so for a business, you just want to make sure you are updated, you know, that you filled out, like I said, the training portion of it was really key to some of those businesses so that they came up. So, you know, we haven't had that, and that's probably not a bad concern to have if you're going to link a lot of people off, or if you're going to actually individually put all those businesses in their links. That's probably something you want to discuss. But again, who's going to monitor it? How are you going to monitor it? That all comes down to cost, and it comes down to people. So.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah,
Aaron?
I just have something to add. I guess two things about that. One of them we touched on about the consistency of having the sites kind of work the same way, but I'm not in support of having them all look exactly the same. And one of those reasons is politically, the audiences are different, and therefore the design should apply to that audience. I don't believe that just because it's community portal, like every single site has to be exactly the same. The content and the design should be able to shift. Politically, that makes it a little bit easier if one group, let's say the economic development group, is doing nothing to keep their site updated, and the tourism is updating all of their tools daily. It takes a little of the political pressure off, because there's not going to be the feeling like the economic development group's taking away from the tourism's work, even though knowing that the whole portal working as a whole is going to be the strongest. So that's one piece. Is I believe that a portal should still respect the brand and identity of the organization that's participating, because if you're in a situation where you try to centralize the portal so much, where there's one person in control of it all, and the other people are expected to contribute, but don't feel like they have control over at least the look and feel of their organization, there's going to be political problems, guaranteed. And eventually, not immediately. And then the other piece that we do is that we have a person, and we offer this as a service to our economic development portals, is that we have a person that actually calls everybody and checks in once a month and helps source current news. So say, hey, did you know this is going on in the state? This is really relevant to your region or to your county. Let's make sure this gets on your site. Like, we are actively engaging them and making sure that their site is current. If they haven't had something up in a couple weeks, we will make recommendations and actually go to the point of even posting them with their permission to make sure that that's active and engaged. And having that role in there, as opposed to everybody kind of being on their own and hoping everyone's going to work equally, is I think a more progressive approach now versus what it was kind of like in the past, where everybody owned their own piece. There is somebody that's in charge of making sure this portal stays current, which is the most important thing. So yeah, both of those things. I mean, respecting the identities and making sure that people can get that kind of support. The other piece I'd just like to add, because we find it saves us tons and tons of time, is that there's certain types of content that you can write in advance. The worst thing is to sit down on Monday and think, what should I put on my website and on my social media tools that'll help further my goal and objectives this morning? And there's just, it's impossible. You need to have a bigger picture of what you're doing and how you're going about doing it. And so if you can get down to a few goals and a couple strategies, then you can pre-write a lot of that stuff. Like in the economic development world, you might have a business park that's got a couple available sites on it that you want to be able to market, but it's not going to be a new site next week and another site the following week unless you're in a major metropolitan area. You're going to only have a couple sites. And so you can pre-write some content all about that business park and have it already set up for Twitter and Facebook and have some of the keywords you want in it. Pre-write even some news posts that might speak to a specific target industry in different ways, or different target industries for the same site, 2 different messages. And that way you already have content that already applies to your goals and strategies. So that way, even if there isn't current news, if you're in a really small town, you're really struggling to find something current, or you don't have time to write something, or somebody else isn't doing their part, you at least can have some news that's going out regularly. And that's far better than a stagnant site.
Okay, I've got a final question, and it deals with how do you deal effectively with firms like the two of you have. If I'm in a community and we may have a tourism portal, and we may have an economic development portal, and a city government, maybe a government portal. And if each one is each organization's tied to a different webmaster with different firm, any advice for helping them to work together across those lines? Mary?
It's such a hard one, because when people have different web companies, I mean, it is tough. I mean, but honestly, going into it, that's something that needs to be brought up right away. And how can you get everything to work together, I guess, and it's definitely one where you want to, again, the firm that you pick, it's something, the strategy that they're going to help to bring you guys all together, however the goals of what you're wanting to accomplish. So I guess to me, it really comes down to, it's such a situation by situation idea. And, I'm anxious to hear Aaron had any other ideas about that. But I think our biggest thing is when someone already has, they already have a web designer stuff. I mean, it's things you can. It's kind of like crossing that path when it comes, and okay, I guess let's we got to see what we are able to do and what we're not able to accomplish. So, do you have any thoughts on that, Aaron?
Oh, you mean people are involved?
Say?
People are involved. Yeah, Aaron?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I have 3 thoughts. But the first one is that if in most cases, if you can get one company to build all the parts, that's ideal because then there's the most guaranteed ability to work behind systems. It's really tricky for a web company to go work on another web company's code. And the reason is because there's so many ways to code the same thing. It's like you could say a sentence a bunch of different ways and mean the same thing. And so, so that's one option, is that you just go with a company and have them build it all. That's the most efficient. The second one is you make some kind of agreement amongst the organizations to use the same kind of system. So that way, if you do have somebody like an IT person or something that's got some programming knowledge in the community that can be responsible, can at least engage the various sites and maybe do something with it, or might bring down the learning curve, where I've heard of things where the whole community chooses the same content management system, so that if there's a change of positions in one of the organizations, there's somebody else that can show them how to update the site because it was the same kind of content management system or programming. But that's still got its own, just brings the learning curve down, but it requires a lot of internal stuff anyway. Beyond that, if you end up with a situation where it's not really officially a portal because there are a bunch of different websites and they're not connected, then I'd look at in order to get the most out of like this conversation and working together as a community, is focus all on human process around those sites. So how are we going to work as a group to pass around current news, and what process are we? Maybe it ends up becoming more manual. Like every Monday, I'm going to be sending an email to this group with my latest news so that they can pick and choose from this list and put it into their sites, and work on things that you can control and agree on as a whole, because without that consistency, that's the efficiency of working together.
Great. Julie Foote suggests good idea to have things in the same place or section on the page, so users can usually find things quickly. And so having a consistency, I think, is obviously is a great idea, and kind of ties into what Aaron was talking about with the community brand. Everyone can have their individual sites, but if there's at least some commonality of the look, or there's not 4 different community logos on 4 different sites, that's probably a positive. Becky, I think we're about done. Do you want to send us home? Or maybe Becky's already at home. Oh, there she is.
Hi, there I am. I'm trying to get up here with you guys. I want to say thank you so much, Aaron and Mary and Bill, for moderating our discussion today. I think it all went really great and smooth for a first time out with a new platform, so I'm really appreciative of everybody for hanging in here. Our next webinar will be July the 11th. It's going to be from 3 to 4. It's on a Thursday, and it's going to be working effectively with PCs for people. So I want to once again say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Angie, for coming, Allie for coming, and I'm going to go ahead and close this down. Thanks a lot, everybody. Oh, I was going to tell you, too, I'm going to go ahead and put a link to the recording on the Facebook page. So if anybody wants to get it from there, share it with everybody, that's where it's going to be. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.